Hey guys, welcome to Bastion Time. I'm your host Bastion. This is story time, and let's just jump right into it. So this story is about buying this house that you can see the upstairs loft of. The same house that you've seen in all of my videos since forever ago. And it's not about buying this house specifically, but about buying houses, the whole house buying experience in general, which was a disaster. So first of all, I have a very specific style of house that I prefer, and that is not this, which is fine, whatever. And that is a farmhouse style from like the early 1900s, even slightly before the Victorian age. So if you've ever seen any iteration of Green Gables except for the actual real one that's physically located on Prince Edward Island, that one's the exception. But any movie or TV show representation of Green Gables, that is my dream house. So we did find a house that wasn't that one exactly, but it was an old style farmhouse. It was very, very cute, and I loved it. I was in love with it. Well, I should really tell you the story about the first house that I fell in love with, which was also a Victorian era house, Victorian era farmhouse. It was smaller, but whatever. But it also, from the pictures, needed a lot of work. But it was very inexpensive. It was easily within our budget, but there was no possible way, by the time I saw it online, there was no possible way. They were accepting offers for it on just like the next day or 2 days from then, and there was no possible way we could get our realtor to get us in to look at it in time. So I was crazy, and I was like, this is the house of my dreams. In retrospect, it really isn't, but oh well, whoops. Let's go look at it. I mean, we couldn't look at it, so let's place an offer on it. And my partner was like, we're not placing an offer on a house that we haven't physically seen. And I'm like, but we can see the pictures. And he was like, that's ridiculous. You're being crazy. And it's true. I get a little overly enthusiastic to unrealistic, that story about that dating that fellow YouTuber, that kind of thing. I just really want to jump straight into things. So thank goodness we didn't, because I remember paying attention to how things were going with that house, and it was clear it needed a lot of work. Hilariously though, we ended up buying this house in that same neighborhood, and so we've passed by that house quite frequently, and whoever bought it has done a very good job at, what's the word I'm looking for, reconstructing it? That's not the word. Remodeling it, fixing it. Oh, because the important piece of information is that house did get an offer placed on it almost immediately, and then it was pending, and I was like, gosh darn it, I'm so mad that somebody else is buying my dream house. Again, it isn't my dream house, but whatever. And then it went back on the market, and then their new listing for it mentioned that had severe issues in the roof. The second floor had major issues. It was never properly supported. So we did end up, I convinced him, let's go ahead and look at it now, and we finally could. And yes, aesthetically, the structure of it, very ideal, but the second floor, just walking on that second floor, you're like, what, did somebody who had no idea what they were doing build this? Why does it feel so like I'm gonna fall right through it? So yeah, sure enough, according to that listing, it needed severe work on the second floor. So whoever bought it must have ended up doing all that work, because now it looks beautiful. But anyway, so we didn't get that house. And then this other house I'm talking about, this blue house that was a farmhouse style, it was in our budget, which I was very confused about because it was basically perfect. I don't need a giant house. I don't need a 5-bedroom, 10-bedroom house, whatever. 3 bedrooms, plenty for me. A bedroom for my partner and me, a guest bedroom, and an extra guest bedroom, or it can be the library or whatever. That's enough. But so that's what this house had, and it had, I don't know how to describe it except that it's a farmhouse and it was cute, and it didn't have that big of a backyard, but that's okay. It did have raspberry bushes, which I liked. Anyways, I was in love with this house. I wanted it so bad. It reminded me specifically Another reference that you're probably not going to get is there was this show that I watched as a kid called Road to Avonlea. At least that's what it was called in Canada. Here it was just straight up called Avonlea for some reason. And the main family, the King family, had this house, this blue farmhouse, and it looked almost identical to that. With some basic changes, it could have looked almost exactly like that house, and frankly slightly better because it had like a bay window in the front. Anyway, the point is I was in love with this house. We placed an offer. The offer was accepted. I was so excited, but then in case you've never been through the house buying process, what happens next is an inspector comes and looks at the house and creates like a 5-page document about every teeny tiny little thing that's wrong with that house. Now, the previous owners, or the current owners, knew that there was major foundation issues, and not the roof, but the things supporting the roof issues. And sure enough, the inspection said, yes, absolutely, but I'm just a general inspector, so you will need to hire an actual foundation person and an actual roof person to take a look at this. The foundation, you can probably fix up by either completely replacing the foundation, which is absorbently expensive, or placing these jacks in, basically, these joist things to hold it up. So yeah, we hired an actual foundation inspector and an actual roof or whatever inspector, and they both arrived at the same kind of conclusion, which is, yes, here's how much it would cost, or not inspector, but the person who would actually end up doing the job to basically get a bid. And they were like, yes, we could just put jacks in. You don't have to replace the foundation. We would strongly recommend it, but you don't have to right now. Because, by the way, these kinds of things must be done in order for a bank to be willing to lend you money to do it. There are certain things that just absolutely have to be done. If a house is completely falling apart, a bank will not lend you the money to buy the house, so to get your mortgage, basically. So we were like, fine, whatever absolutely needs to be done in order for us to get the mortgage, we will do. We won't do, but we will ask that the owners of the house do. They were saying, yikes, we weren't expecting this. This is going to be a lot of money. We don't even have that money. We don't know what we're going to do, so I don't think this is going to work. And so there was a lot of back and forth until finally they arrived at, okay, here's the deal. Go ahead and submit your addendum or whatever that says to the offer that will basically say, we will buy this house from you if you fix only the things that are necessary. So that would be the foundation, and we will only do that with those joist things. We cannot afford to replace the whole foundation. So only that and the lowest possible bid that we can get for the roof thing. And we're like, okay, great. And they were like, very clear, their agent to us was very clear, they can barely afford to do those things. So they really can't afford to do anything beyond those things, so don't even ask. And usually in this whole house buying process, you do ask for everything under the sun. They counter that and say, we can't really do X and Y and Z, and it's like a back and forth thing until you finally agree, like, okay, fine, we're done here. They made it crystal clear they only wanted us to ask for those two things. Our realtor sent them over a list of, before she sent it over, she sent it to us, a list of everything under the sun, which they had specifically asked us not to do because they said we won't be able to do, we can barely do these things. In fact, we don't even really know if we can do these things, but we'll try our best. But, and they would have to have done them. So don't send anything else. And our realtor did not listen to us. And by the way, she was very pushy through all of these house buying process. We had submitted so many offers on so many different houses, but never had offered too much more than the asking price. So we didn't end up getting them. But with this one, again, she was very pushy, and she went ahead and sent to us everything under the sun. And I wrote back to her and said, I'm just going to say her name, it doesn't matter, Christine. They specifically asked us not to ask for any of these things except for the foundation and the roof situation. Like, please revise this so that it is exactly just the roof and the foundation like they said. And then she sent me back an extremely unprofessional, nasty email that was like, I have been in this business for 20 plus years and I know what I'm doing, and this is just part of the process. You just have to ask for these things and just let me do my job. And if you don't want to let me do my job, then you can fire me. And, but I know what I'm doing. And And then technically it was my partner who had hired her. So technically it was just him that was her client, he that was her client, not me. So she was like, and besides, you're not even my client. Your partner is my client. And so I will wait until I hear from him. And then the biggest fight that my partner and I have ever had is that he just went ahead and signed, digitally signed her list of everything under the sun. And she went ahead and sent that over to the sellers of the house, and they immediately terminated the sale. Because, of course they did, because they had been crystal clear that they did not want us to send them everything under the sun. They only wanted those two. So since they had terminated the sale, I reached, first of all, we'll just skim over the fact that that was the biggest argument that my partner and I had ever had, which he did admit, like, I shouldn't have done that. But then I was like, and also she is extremely rude to me. I require of you to send this agent email saying she cannot treat me like that anymore. And so she was kind of apologetic, but also made a bunch of excuses about how stressed she was in her life and stuff like that. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Your excuses don't matter. Just, you can't behave that way with your clients. I certainly could have never in my life treated any of my personal training clients like that. That's just, it's impossible. You just don't do that. But anyway, no matter how, I've had extremely stressful times in my life. I had my mother passed away and I was still training my clients. You just, treat your clients poorly. So she was apologetic enough that my partner still wanted to continue working with her. And so I refused to talk to her thereafter. We did not get that house. And I personally emailed the seller agent of that house and said, look, our agent totally botched this. Is there any way, I don't know the legalities here, but is there any way we can just cut her out of the equation and I can work directly with you, the seller agent, and we can figure something out about this house? And she said, technically, that's not really allowed because you're sort of contractually linked to that agent. And also, by the way, my clients have decided they're taking the house off of, they don't even think they could have actually afforded, in retrospect, to do those two things. So they would have been in a real bind after all. So they're taking the house off the market for a little while until they can figure out what they want to do. Fast forward just about this specific house, they did eventually relist it on the market at like 20,000 less than what they had been, because basically they're like, we can't afford that 20,000. So we can't take care of these things. So if you want to buy this house, you're going to have to pay for those things in order to buy the house. And then of course somebody else, which we could have done, frankly, that would have been fine for us if that had been offered to us, but somebody ended up buying the house. In any case, again, in retrospect, it wasn't exactly what I wanted. It was pretty freaking close, but not exactly what I wanted. I was just checking the time on the video because this is going very long, so I'm just going to try to skim through to get into this house. So we did look at a whole bunch of other houses, none of which I never was passionately in love with like I was that blue farmhouse. And then we got to the point, and it was very stressful because at this point in time, I'm still renting a room in a house that is owned by my friend, and my partner had been renting in my same neighborhood a room in a house that was owned by his friend, but his friend was selling that house that he was living in. So he moved in with me because we were gonna buy a house together into my tiny room. So all of my stuff, all of his stuff in one tiny room. And then my friend's girlfriend who lived at that house with us was so used to the fact that I had not been home for months, basically, because I was pretty much 100% over at my partner's place, that now, and she's a very introverted person, and so now to have me and my partner in the house all the time with her, she was made things extremely uncomfortable. Frankly, she was a witch with the B letter instead the whole time. So we needed to get out of there. So when we finally got to the point where we had looked at a bazillion houses and months kept going on and we hadn't found anything, we finally looked at a house that, this house and one other house that were, I think, the same price and were basically the same, but some had pros and some had cons. This house, the pros were, I liked the general shape of it better. The outside structure looking of it, it was more classic in my opinion looking, whereas the other house was a newer aesthetic and all of the things that I thought were cons about it in retrospect are actually pros, and frankly, I wish we went with that one. But anyways, the point is, we ended up going with this one because it was closer to my work, closer to my partner's work, and the other one was further out. It had everything about it in retrospect was nicer. I just don't know why we didn't go with that one, except, again, I just really had it in my head that I wanted a more classic looking house. Not most houses built from like 1990 onward to today are very cookie cutter. They all have the same basic open kitchen concept of the breakfast bar thing wrapping around the kitchen, and then it's like your kitchen and your living room and dining room are all one big room together, and I don't care for that. So this house did not have that we're living in now. So anyways, we bought this house, and now we're living in it 5 years later. So that's pretty interesting, except our neighborhood is going to hell. We were told when we bought this house by that realtor, who I can't stand, oh, it's an up-and-coming neighborhood, and it has never, 5 years later, it has still not come up. It's still pretty crappy, and in fact, if anything, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. Although, strangely, our house value has skyrocketed almost $100,000, which I don't understand since the neighborhood is so crappy, but that is Portland housing for you. And when we moved in here, in fact, when we were looking at houses in general, it was never, this is our final house that we will ever live in. It was always, this is our starter house. This is the first house we're buying, but then we will sell that one after our equity has gone up and we will get our actual dream house. So fingers crossed, that plan is finally going to start coming. We're finally making steps 5 years later, or 4 years later rather, towards making that plan come to fruition. We're going to build it from scratch. Not me personally, I don't know how to build a house, but I found several house plans that fit the aesthetic. You can't find the aesthetic that I want in existing houses on the market, so thankfully there are blueprints of houses that fit the aesthetic that I want, and thankfully my partner agrees with. So anyways, we're in the process of trying to find land and the exact blueprint, you know. So anyways, wish me luck on that. We'll see in a year from now if that has come to pass or not. Because it was supposed to have come to pass last year. But anyways, see you guys in the next video where I babble about, I don't even know what. We'll see. Bye, guys.